is J.B. Holmes. I'm candidate for Collier County School Board District 3. Currently, I'm a teacher in Collier County Public Schools in alternative education. I teach algebra and geometry at Beacon High School on the Lorenzo Walker campus for Collier County Public Schools. I also teach for Collier County Public Schools. I teach the severely emotionally disturbed. So we have quite a challenging task there. I am a Doctor of Education in Organizational Leadership, which leads directly into school board potential. I also am a United States Air Force veteran, and my wife is a former United States Army nurse, and she teaches at adult education at Barron Collier High School. We're both members of the Golden Gate Veterans of Foreign Wars post. I have extensive experience. I'm retired from business, so I have extensive experience in contract management and economics and budgeting. My master's degree was, I studied contract management under systems management from a master's degree, and under my bachelor's degree I did business economics and management, so I have a lot of experience and education that leads directly to being able to be on the school board and handling budgets and contracts, which is a major portion of their work. So today, I want to thank you for having me be here, and I think if you look at my website, J.B. Holmes PhD, and I explained to you why I had to use the PhD to make up for J.B. Holmes the golfer, you'll see that my experience and education makes me by far the best qualified candidate for Collier County School Board District 3.
Tell us about your experience in business.
My experience in business, I worked overseas for Fujitsu for many years, and I was their business manager overseas. I was working in Australia for Fujitsu, liaisoning between Australia and Japan. I had worked for an American branch of Fujitsu called Amdahl here in the United States out of California, and they transferred me. I transferred to the main company, Fujitsu, and they put me in Australia to liaison. So we did the business, actually the financing of computers, big computer sales at that time. The computers were really real computers, not these little ones we have now. They were just big as this room or bigger, and it cost millions and millions of dollars. So that was financing, and of course the transferring of money internationally between companies. I had previously worked for IBM before moving into that position. After I retired from that position, I went to get my master's degree. And when I got my master's degree, which is contract management and business management, the degree's name is systems, Master of Science in Systems Management. And then I joined Kmart for 20 years and did their contract management and business economics, where I managed budgets all the way from $12 million to $100 million annually. And then, of course, we know what happened with Kmart. They have downsized significantly with the advent of Walmart, so I retired from that organization. I was here in Naples when I retired. They had transferred me here, and I became a teacher for Collier County Public Schools. That was in 2004, so I now have 10 years of experience.
How did you make that transition from business executive or business person to teacher?
I had always really wanted to be a teacher, and in business, I taught extensively in the business and the commercial environment. I taught sales, and of course, when I was in the Air Force, I taught fighter pilot training for the Air Defense Command. So I had been in the teaching all my life, and I really had a compassion, a love for teaching, and I wanted to, as I got on and I matured and was able to retire, I did really want to pass that on to younger people, all of my experience and education. I felt I had a commitment to society to serve them, and that's the way I felt I could best serve.
In your information, there's quite a bit of emphasis on the budgeting, zero-based budgeting, and line-by-line budget reviews. Is that because of your work experience and expertise, or do you think there's something severely or even mildly wrong in the school expenditures now?
Both. One, I could never turn in a deficit budget as a business manager, and I had to stay in line with my budget, and I feel very strongly. I'm a conservative person, personally, and I'm of the Dave Ramsey style of personal finances. I don't owe anybody any money. I don't owe in my house, my vehicles, my credit cards. We're completely debt-free and have been so for years, and we've invested our money wisely. We have properties. That's what makes it possible for me to run for the school board, because we don't have any debts. And my wife can be a practicing artist. You know, she's a retired nurse. She is a practicing artist, a very, very accomplished artist in many, many different fields. Pine needle weaving, for example, but that's aside. I feel strongly you should never run a deficit budget, that there's no reason to run a deficit budget. We know the Collier County School Board has for years run a deficit budget. We end up and they use that deficit budget as an excuse to deny teachers raises, for example. The teachers went 6 years without raises. Now, I compliment the teachers, and I support them 100%. They made the sacrifice during the difficult economic times by not having raises, not getting any extra money. And even their contract was ignored for 3 years. They didn't get their contractual agreed steps in that contract. We contributed significantly to the recovery of our economy. In the meantime, while they're running deficit budgets, at the end of the year, they have a 20% plus or minus surplus budget. So it shows me that they were doing bad budgeting in the first place. And if you're a teacher in the classroom, you're at the bottom of the scale, we have many, many experiences where we couldn't get basic supplies in the classroom, but if you went over to the administration center, they were just had a wealth of machinery. One day I had asked for staples, like a little staple gun, staples. And all they could give me was one skein of staples, just one skein of staples. They said that's all they could afford. That same afternoon, I went over to the administration center, and they were putting up a $10,000 flat screen TV in the lobby to advertise what a great job they were doing. They just ran advertisements about administration. I thought there was some kind of a disconnect. I felt there was some kind of a disconnect there that day. And I've had other similar experiences. You've probably heard me speak about the GCA contract. We did privatization back under Dr. Thompson, and that contract has been renewed. We let go 235 plus or minus Collier County Public School employees that were performing custodial service for the county, and they did an excellent job. Now, I invite any of you to come over and visit me at my school, Beacon High School, on the Lorenzo Walker campus. The floors are filthy. I have teachers that I teach with that have taught for 40 years, and they said they've never seen the schools so on campus, so filthy and dirty. I clean my own room every day after class.
But as a budgeting measure, the GCA contract, at least it showed cost savings. Is it, are the savings not there, or is the work not being done satisfactorily, or
those
both?
Savings would appear to be there, but we're depriving the children. The money is not being directed properly. We're taking it away from the students and the teachers and directing it elsewhere. When of course it doesn't have to be. We know that you have a surplus budget. And that same organization, GCA, which doesn't have enough money to maintain our schools, contributed $50,000 last summer to the superintendent's retreat at the Hilton on Marco Island for all the administrators, their wives, and their administrators, their spouses, and their children. And as a part of that, they asked the teachers who are coaches, which are teachers with 30, 35 years, our highest paid teachers, they asked those teachers to come in and be the babysitters for the children during a conference that was paid for by vendors such as GCA.
With your experience in contracts, are you saying that you think this ought to be a voided contract and another firm come in, or would you go back to having employees?
Would prefer is that we don't privatize anything that has to do with students. Anyone who's in direct contact with students. We tried it, fair enough, but that's not working. So we need to go back to having those custodial services provided by the good employees of Collier County Public Schools. And so we can get those standards back up to where your children and your grandchildren, in some of our cases, are being taught in a clean, healthy, safe environment.
you mentioned line-by-line budgeting and zero-based budgeting. Are there areas that you can see now, and maybe you haven't looked at it in depth yet, now where costs could be cut or line items could be eliminated?
I think we have to go through it line by line and see what's in that budget. I want to make it clear that I don't think there's any fraud going on or anything illegal, but I know from talking to other teachers, for example, or teachers on special assignment that go work in the administration center for some number of years. One of my friends, to tell her story, went up to Orlando for a conference. They put her in a room in one of the hotels that by herself. She had 2 bedrooms, living room and kitchen and all of that. By herself. The cost of the room was just outrageous compared to what we could have spent. She didn't need 2 bedrooms, and she didn't need all the kitchen. All her meals were at the conference. So we do say things that are probably hard to find in the budget, to be honest with you. And we know that at the end of the year they do have a 20% surplus, funding surplus. We should look at those items that generated surpluses, and we know that much is being budgeted poorly, and we can look back over the history of the last 3 or 4 years very easily and identify those items where the budget needs to be cut or reappropriated or reassigned. But I'm adamant about not ever having a deficit budget. There is no reason for us to ever have a deficit budget.
Everyone seems to have a take on the Common Core curriculum. What about you?
Well, Common Core, as a whole program, it has many things tied to it. That program has to go away. It has to go away. As a teacher, the teaching methodologies and techniques are virtually undecipherable. I teach high school algebra and geometry. Using their methodologies and techniques, I cannot understand how to teach elementary school math. A simple addition and subtraction problem that has 12 indecipherable steps in it. So we know methodologies and techniques of that. We know there's data mining, that they're asking points of data about the parents and families. They'll ask your political affiliation, your religious affiliation, and things that are not the government's business. But if you're going to implement Common Core, and the federal government gives you money, there's going to be strings attached to it, such as their methodologies and techniques and their data mining that we don't want. What we do want, of course, is the highest possible standards for our teachers and our students. We can enjoy those standards, we appreciate those standards, and that would be a good way of measuring schools across the state, to be able to have the same standards. That's good, but we certainly don't have the same standards in Naples, Florida, as you might have in Detroit, Michigan. So those should be locally controlled standards. I believe in local control of education with state oversight. I always believe there should be a larger body overseeing any organization to ensure integrity.
You mentioned contracts. What's your take on the recent contract extension for the superintendent?
That is interesting, and her contract in and of itself is fine. She was initially hired when Julie Sprague was chairman of the board, and Julie Sprague I've known Julie for years. She's a very straightforward, honest person. She turns square corners at all times. There was nothing done underground, nothing secret done. Dr. Patton is a highly qualified individual. She's a great communicator. Her background has been checked thoroughly. I'm sure she meets all qualifications. That's her contract. Now, what happened in the school board meeting, the last school board meeting, was a procedure and process that this school board commonly gets into. That was not part of the agenda, as I'm sure you're aware. Ms. Curatolo brought that up after her evaluation to vote on that contract. They're going to renew her contract 2 years earlier than necessary for another 2 years, which gives her 4 years under contract at this moment in time, which of course gives her a golden parachute of $850,000 if she decided deferred admission she did not perform now, which Ms. Sprague asked about. The superintendent's attorney, John Fishbane, ruled that procedure and process legal as it had come out of the evaluation process. Therefore, it did not have to be announced in advance or put on the agenda. That may be true, I'm sure it was legal, but there's a difference between legal and ethical. And this school board has had that practice in the past, as I'm sure you're aware, with the Poinciana cell phone tower, the after-hours issue for elementary schools, bring your own device, and now this the extension of the contract. And I don't fault the superintendent in any way in this. This was not, at least outwardly, this was not her doing. This was, again, an improper process and procedure by the school board itself. And it was very embarrassing. My wife and I go to every school board meeting. We sit all the way through the school board meeting. We want to understand and know everything there is about it. We've done so for years. You can always see me on camera because you can recognize my bald head and her white hair. So we met a couple after school board. It was a couple down from Alabama visiting. Very, very nice couple, very distinguished couple. And they had come down, one of their children was thinking about moving to Naples, and they had come down to Naples to see what Naples was like, what the places they could send their children now. One of the places they decided to visit was the school board during a meeting. And that whole process and procedure was so embarrassing, and the conduct of the school board members was so unprofessional that I questioned whether that couple would ever recommend their children move to Collier County and have their children in the public school system.
You just mentioned the Bring Your Own Device initiative. Irregardless how it came about, do you support it going forward?
What I support in that is we want to reach out. We want all of our students to have a 21st century opportunity for education. And to do that, we're going to have to embrace technology. But we need to do that wisely and safely. Now, the American Pediatric Association, along with its Canadian counterpart, have issued a paper outlining, detailing the different things that are physical and mental and developmental that can happen to students using BYO devices held up to your head or face all the time. Psychological also. What I would advocate is that from the age of, below the age of 13, we don't allow them to use devices at all because it's in such a developmental stage. 13 and above, we should restrict the amount of time they spend with devices, bring their own device, to no more than 1 hour a day in the classroom, because they're still developing. We know they want to know how to use those devices, and we know it's very important, and we can use them if we use them safely and properly. And I also maintain that the final arbiter of the amount of use in the classroom should be the classroom teacher, with the consent of parents, of course.
Can you elaborate a little bit more on how well you think the superintendent is functioning?
Well, as I said earlier, we know that her hiring process was done in the full light of day. It was an extensive process, and we'd have to compliment Julie Sprague on her professionalism during that time. And so I've known Julie Sprague for years, and I know that everything was done in the full light of day. She has the qualifications the school board was looking for at that time. We know under Dr. Thompson, Dr. Dennis Thompson, the communications and relations with the community were less than what they should be, and she has a great communication with the family, with the community, families, parents, teachers, students. She is 100% qualified to do the job. My question again is not so much about her, but the process and procedure under which some things happen, such as the Bring Your Own Device program, which was 18 months under development and then announced at the last moment. We know the Poinciana cell phone tower was announced at the last moment. The sports club issue, they spent 1.5 years developing that and implementing their own program, which ended up costing parents 2 to 3 times as much money for a program that certainly isn't any better than sports club. Sports club, parents raved about sports club. They filled that school board chamber that day. They had to open the back rooms, the extra room to let parents in, and the board ignored the parents, which is something they have done over all these issues. So I'm not running against the superintendent. I'm running for the school board. The superintendent reports directly to the school board. The superintendent is hired by the school board, and they direct her activities, his or her activities. And as such, the school board should be directing that activities, and anything that is done in less than the full light of day needs to be brought out and exposed and be discussed by the school board. One of my great issues in relation to the school board is the consent agenda. For any of you that have attended those meetings, you know that in the first minute of the school board, they approve the consent agenda. There's 60 or 70 items under that consent agenda, and they include things like the Bring Your Own Device program, the sports club program, that points you on a cell phone tower. Those are all approved under there, and the public has no notice of that. That information is only released to the public maybe 48 hours before the school board meeting itself. The consent agenda should be released to the public at least 30 days before the school board meeting itself. Under that, it contains all the personnel changes for the administration, promotions and administration, and promotions and salary increases under the administration should be brought forward before the public, so that the public and the teachers know what's happening. And any of these programs like this, certainly major programs, should be brought to attention well ahead of time. And excuse me, I lost my train of thought there for a moment. But we need to have those out well in advance of the meetings, and so the public can respond appropriately and be there at the school board meetings to discuss these issues.
I thought you had said earlier that you considered Kamala Patton to be a good communicator. Are these not things that you're reciting?
Well,
are those not communication lapses?
I think there's 2 aspects to that at least. One is going out and communicating to the community, speaking in the community. She's very, very good at that. That communicating these programs, again, as a process and procedure, we have certainly been lacking in that area.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but you work with the Collier County Education Association in terms of negotiating contracts, that
Yes.
sort of thing. How's the relationship between the administration and the union?
Well, I due to my contract experience, education, and background, I'm always in attendance at the contract negotiations. That's one of the things I do to support the teachers in Collier County as an executive board member of the Collier County Education Association. And those meetings are always polite and professional. If you've ever been to them, they're not like they might be pictured in the movies where everybody's smoking cigars and it's not the old UAW sort of mine workers, you know, United Mine Workers. Maybe I said when we hear about those stories, Tony Boyle and those people, we hear those stories. It's not like that at all. It's very friendly, and friendly is the wrong word to use, but it's very professional at all times. The administration, and I'll use the word stubborn here, the administration gets very stubborn on some points and refuses to budge or move or listen. And to some extent, they get very arrogant. If you're sitting there watching these presidents, you're watching across the table, you'll see that, and I'm sure you guys have seen that plenty in your interviews over lifetime. You know when somebody's being arrogant and they've got you, they're not going to budge, they're not going to move, and they're not going to be, I don't want to use the word honest with you, but they might not be fully disclosing their position.
Have you received any financial support from any local organizations?
I've received financial support from the Collier County firefighters, and of course from the Collier County Education, well, from Tiger, which is the political PAC for the Collier County Education Association. The Collier County Education Association itself cannot endorse candidates or give them financial support. So Tiger, the Collier County firefighters, I'm trying to think, I don't have that list in front of me, but most of my donations have been from either myself or from small donations by teachers and you know, friends and family that support us.
What about charter schools? What are your feelings in terms of the value of charter schools?
Charter schools are perfectly legal by legislation. The teachers have to be certified the same as any other teacher. The students, it's a public school by definition. The students are subjected to the same testing as everyone else. It gives parents choice. I'm all for parents' choice. We certainly want parents' choice. Not everybody fits into the same mold. Not everybody's a newspaper reporter, for example, the qualification, but not everybody's a teacher. But so it gives parents choice, and if they want a special program for their student, such as the classical program that the Mason Classical Academy is offering, fine. I'm good with that. The only thing I feel is that the administration of the schools, the administration of the charter schools, should be more open to the public. The teachers are, in effect, public school teachers, but from that point on up, those people are not, they do not have to be certified by the state. There's no leadership certification like you have for assistant principals, deans, and principals in the regular school system. There's no certification whatsoever, so we don't know their qualifications. And I'm very, very concerned about the ethics of being associated, sitting on the board, for example, of a charter school. You don't have boards in public schools, so sitting on a school board, sitting on a charter school board and being part of the school board, I find that even though it may be legal, I question the ethics of it. There's a difference between things being legal and being ethical.
Would it be different than someone being on, say, the school improvement committee at a traditional public school, or the PTO of a traditional public school, and being on the school board? Would that be a problem?
You'd have to look and see if they're all involved in finances. If they're accepting, if the PTO, the PTA, the SAC is accepting money from the county or from the school board system itself, or if that position is for profit or has any income in any way. That would affect my decision on that one.
The low grades that are been concentrated on the schools in the Immokalee area and certain other geographic areas of the county, how would you address trying to bring those schools up?
What I have found in my experience is that student performance declines substantially as parental involvement declines. My students in alternative education are certainly, many of them are challenged. They're there for a variety of reasons, but most of them are certainly challenged. And it's not because they're intellectually incapable. The teachers work very hard with them, but there's very little parental involvement. And if the parents aren't involved with the student's education, or grandparents or a direct family member, that student's education suffers dramatically. In the Immokalee community, it is a social situation in that community that prevents them from being as involved in their students' education as possible. Now, it can also be language difficulties that a parent does not speak English or does not speak English well, and in their working environment out there, they can continue speaking in their native language. So, and they don't want to come to the school and have to speak English with the principal or with the teacher, and I can understand that. But the net effect is still the same. If the parent is not directly involved with child's education, that child's education is going to suffer dramatically.
We're about out of time. Is there any topic that we haven't touched on that you really wanted to stress, or do you have a final message for the voters?
Well, my final message for the voters is that when I'm on the school board, that is going to be my only job. I will not be performing any other job. I will not be sitting on any other boards or any other committees other than the school board. That will be my only job. It will be any immediate member of my family. That will be their only job. And I will not be participating, as I said, in any other organization that may have the potential to be a conflict of interest or even a perceived conflict of interest, legal or otherwise. And I would ask everyone to go to my website at www.jbholmesphd.com and review my credentials, and you'll see that I'm by far the best qualified candidate for school board. And I would ask for their support and their vote.